Hi, Gaye DeRusso with the Majestic Rider. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about saddle fit, and we're going to just try to keep it simple and basic. A lot of times when gaited people are looking for saddles, they don't understand that the saddle actually needs to fit the horse. So it's not just, I like crest ridge saddles, you buy a crest ridge saddle. That's not the way you do it. You have to make sure that the tree fits the horse, and then the saddle is also fitting you, and it is staying in place, and all of those things become very important. With gaited horses, a lot of horses have a shorter back. And so when you see saddles that are made more for gaited horses versus just a regular Western saddle or an English saddle, you'll see it doesn't have a long skirt. So a lot of the Western saddles have skirts that come back here, and with a horse that has a short back, well, then that can rub their hindquarter, make it uncomfortable for them, and then they'll be less likely to gait well if it rubs them when they're gaiting. So with the gaited saddles, a lot of them have this shorter skirt, which is helpful. Okay. So again, you're just trying to find a saddle that fits your horse. That's the most important because they're carrying you, and then you have to make sure the saddle fits you. So what things are you looking for? The saddle has a tree in it, which comes from about here to here. And you can Google saddle tree so you can see what that looks like, and I'll try to put a picture in here. So you can't see it, but it's within the saddle. And that tree needs to fit the horse just like your shoes need to fit you. So if it's too big, it can slide around on the horse and that can bother them. If it's too small, like it's too narrow, it can push down on them in certain spots and cause them pain. It usually won't wiggle around as much. So if anything, if you have to decide between too small or too big, a wider tree is better because at least you can shim it. But if you get a tree that's very narrow, you can't really do anything to fix it if your horse is wider. So that's the first lesson. Now, when you put your saddle on the horse, you'll see I have lots of pads here, so it's a little hard to see. But you'll see these are conch rings here and here. Most saddles have them on there, and when you line it up, it might be hard to see, but all my stuff is knotted here. That should be level on the horse. So it should be a level line going across, okay? If it's tilted up or it's tilted down, that means your saddle is not sitting flat on the horse, and you need to evaluate why. Where is it too tight, or maybe where is it too wide? The other things you're trying to see is to make sure that you have clearance in the back. So you should be able to see air underneath here, and some people will take a dowel and put it through all the way to the front because you're trying to make sure the saddle does not sit down on the horse's spine, because if it does, of course, that causes pain, and that would cause the horse to not want to gait and maybe not want to go forward or anything. And you're trying to make sure you have clearance here as well. I took my horn off, so this is just what they call a night latch. It's like a handle in case I need to grab for something to hang on. When you're on the horse, or when you put the saddle on the horse, you're always trying to make sure that you can fit your fingers around in here and that you have clearance on top of their wither, okay? When you put the pad on, that will help. But if you put this saddle on and it immediately is sitting down on their wither, it's going to be very hard to get that off of their wither well without using a lot of shims. And so you might look into a different saddle that fits better versus having too many shims in there. So you have to make sure there's space. If this pushes down on their wither, a lot of horses will pace. A lot of horses will not go forward because it's causing them pain. So if you have a lazy horse that paces, make sure that saddle is fitting them correctly and it's not pushing down on them. Okay. Now, if the saddle tree is not sitting flat on the horse, there's something that we call bridging. And what it means is that the saddle is sitting here and it's sitting here, but there's no contact in between because the saddle should fit like a glove. So if there's contact here and contact here, then what happens is between those two spots, you get air, and that's what they call bridging. So it's pushing down on their kidney, and it's pushing down more on their wither here. You want to shim that and even that out so it's dispersing your weight evenly over the horse. Otherwise, if it's bridging, similar things can happen where that horse starts pacing, doesn't want to go forward, its back is getting sore. So you have to make sure that saddle tree is fitting the horse well. Now, how do you tell if the saddle tree is fitting well? One, you get a saddle fitter. That's the best thing to do because they're paid to do this all day long. But you're trying to make sure that this fits around the wither, so this has plenty of room, almost too much room if this was a real horse. You just need 2, 3 fingers maybe underneath here, and then some space for the horse's shoulder blade to move. So with the gaited horses, a lot of them really use those shoulders, especially if they're doing a flat walk and a running walk. They're reaching with that front end, so their shoulder needs to be able to move under here. The start of the tree, which is usually about here on most saddles, should be behind their shoulder blade. This is their shoulder blade. And that should be fitting right behind it. And then when the horse's shoulder moves, it actually kind of comes up. So it has to have room in here to allow for that shoulder movement. So you do have to have some usually flare in the shoulder, but each horse is different. Some have bigger shoulders, some have bigger movement, and so you have to make sure it's not impinging on them. So again, clearance here, the tree is going here, so you're kind of reaching underneath, making sure you can get your hand all the way under the tree, and that it is fitting snug the entire way. Again, if you get here and there's a pocket of air, that usually means that the saddle is bridging on the horse and you need to shim it or change pads. Another important thing is that the center of the saddle, when you flip it over, see this canal here? That's going over your horse's spine, and not a lot of people realize it, but you want to check how wide your horse's spine is and make sure that you're going to have good clearance in here. There are pads that you can put shims in, and there's also pads that have spinal clearance. So I'm going to show you pads because this can help. My hand's stuck. This is a diamond wool pad. These are shims in here. So I had some horses with poor top lines, and the saddle was bridging on them, so I really had to build this up. And then over time, as their top line gets better, I'll be able to take those shims out. Now, even with any of these pads, you're always checking your horse after you ride them. Many times it gets very dirty back in here, and all of this can rub on the horse. So you want to clean that, like I didn't. And then again, even things like this can be pinching your horse. So you're checking all those things when your horse has a sore or their hair starting to rub off. Check your saddle pad and check your saddle, see if there's screws or anything that are popping out. Now this is a Crest Ridge saddle pad. They have great saddle pads, and you'll see this is a thinner one, but it's cut out in the middle for spinal clearance. So that way their saddle cannot sit down on the spine. They've already given you clearance. And if you need to shim these, you can call Crest Ridge. They're very helpful, but you can put Velcro on here and shim it if you need to, but it'll usually conform to the horse, and if you use them to help you fit the saddle will usually fit quite well. They're very helpful. But so there are pads that can help you, but you really want to make sure you try to get the best fit you can. Most people are buying saddles from recommendations of other people, and they're not even fitting the horse. So they get the horse, and then the horse won't gait, or it's having problems. When you have poor saddle fit, it can cause a lot of behavior problems. So one, won't go forward. Two, won't go down hills. Bucks, bolts. When you're getting on, it takes off. All those can be things coming from your saddle, so it's very important to check them. And then again, it makes a lot of horses can pace or trot if they're gaited when it's not fitting well, because it pushes on them and they can't use their body like they need to gait. Because we know some of them we have to frame up, and some you kind of have to frame down, and if your saddle is working against you, it's not going to help. The other thing, when you're sitting in your saddle, a lot of people don't know this, you need to be able to fit your hand from the front of the saddle, and mine's a little tight because I have so much padding on here right now, but you should be able to put your hand flat in front of the saddle to make sure it fits you well, okay? And you shouldn't be sitting way up on the back like this. You want to be balanced on your horse so it can carry you well. So the whole point of the saddle, it holds you in place, The tree disperses your weight around the horse so the horse doesn't get any sore spots, but then you also are over the horse's center of balance. Some saddles will sit you back further with your feet out in front of you. A lot of endurance saddles and plantation saddles will do that. But if you have a pacey horse, that's going to push you back more in a chair seat, which is going to make your horse pace more. Those saddles, it's very hard to sit up like this and bring your legs underneath you. So if you're like, I can never get my leg back, it might be the saddle is pushing your leg forward, and that's why you can't. And that's why I like Crest Ridge a lot, because the way their stirrups hang and the way it positions you, it puts you over the horse's center of balance and sits you up correctly. And then, of course, you can tilt your pelvis if you need to help your horse to gait in the beginning. And then once the horse gaits well, you can just sit in neutral position, which is this. And you're always trying to keep your shoulders over your hips and your heels underneath your hips when you're in that neutral, balanced position. Okay? So if you're having problems with your horse, it won't go forward. It's tripping, because saddle fits are very important with tripping. Because if it's pinching its neck, it's pinching the nerves, and then sometimes the horse can't feel its front feet. So if your horse is not gaiting well, tripping, won't go forward, or is going too fast, especially when you first step on, it's taken off, those can be signs that your saddle's not fitting, and you do want to check it. Again, if you don't have a saddle fitter, you check it yourself. It's very easy when you're riding to stick your fingers under here, and if you can't get your fingers under here at all, guess what? Your saddle's too tight. That's pretty easy to figure out. So check it when you're going downhill and all of those things, because the saddle does move when you're going up and down hills. And when you're going downhill, again, if this is pushing down on their wither, they're not going to want to go downhill. Or if it's pinching their back because it's bridging, they're not going to want to go down the hill because the hill is causing them pain. So not going down the hill or rushing down the hill to get it over quickly, all can be signs that your saddle's not fitting. So it's not just buy a gated saddle, and people will fight over this all day long about what saddles to get for horses and what's the best. You just need a saddle that fits, one that's not pushing on your horse and impinging it, one that's not bridging on their back. And it's best, if you can, to have the saddle maker help you fit the horse by sending pictures, measuring it, and then, getting the right pad. It's not just the saddle. The pad also is very important, so you want that saddle fitter to give you advice on what pad to get and if you need to shim it at all. All right. Hope that helps you with your gaited horse and getting your saddle to fit and avoiding problems.